Well, thank you, David, for putting together once again beautiful music to introduce us to the May version of SCAFI, Southern Cross Alliance for Israel. Welcome to everybody. Great to see you. And we have people representing from the very north of Australia to the very south. So we'll just make sure that we're muted if we're not speaking. Always a trouble. So it's wonderful to have you. We're Sydney, Perth, we've got some New Zealand people, and from the rest of the country. It's wonderful to have you with us once again. It's been a big month for those of us who follow the Israeli events, and it continues to evolve day by day and week by week as we move forward in what seems to be an ever increasing escalation at the moment. So your prayers and your support of our Jewish friends as we walk together through all of this is really appreciated, and it's wonderful to have you with us. We've had a number of events during the month, and I'm pleased to announce that finally our Israel Allies Foundation has the bank account, which I'll be posting up in the chat box for those who would like to contribute, and I'll be talking about that at the end of the meeting. The Israel Allies Foundation, its purpose, what we're doing, how we're going about educating and working through with our elected parliamentarians who support Israel into their electorates to educate people about what's happening in real terms. Because if you turn on the news at the moment, I don't know if you do, it's quite, I don't like it, just put it that way, particularly SBS and ABC and whatever. It's a skewed view of what is actually going on. So we need to get out there into the marketplace and to help and work with our Jewish friends in educating and understanding those who get this skewed view and then, react as we've seen recently. And on that, at that point, I'll introduce our founding rabbi, Rabbi Isaac Reisenberg, to say a welcome and to share a little message, as he always does. Welcome, Rabbi.
Yeah, hi, John. Can you hear me?
Yeah, all good.
Oh, good. Thank you for your warm introduction, as always. And now I know why Israel won the popular vote. I begin this evening truly with a heavy heart as we've dedicated this evening to the tragic, senseless killing of Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Milgram. They were, as I'm sure you've heard, they were staffers at the Israeli embassy. They were murdered outside the Jewish Museum in Washington by one 31-year-old Elias Rodriguez. And he told the police, I did it for Palestine. I did it for Gaza. The fact of the matter was, it didn't matter that we were walking side by side. They were a young couple, very much in love. It didn't matter that these two people were idealists. And in fact, they were working tirelessly to bridge gaps between Arabs and Israelis. It didn't matter that they were walking in Washington, D.C., nowhere near Gaza. The only thing that mattered that they were Israeli citizens. Whilst these murders were shocking, truth be told, I was not shocked. They did not come in a vacuum. This murder did not come in a vacuum. They say there's a well-known adage that sticks and stones may break your bones, but names, they will never hurt me. The stark reality is nothing can be further than the truth today, because words can destroy reputation simply with the push of a button. Words can incite hatred, and words can cause violence, even murder, and even death. I think King Solomon got it right when he wrote there in Proverbs that life and death are in the hands of the tongue. And we see it and we hear it on college campuses. Israel has become the scapegoat for the ills of the Western world. Lies about Israel are read on the front pages of major media outlets, as John has highlighted, only to be quietly retracted a day later. The war against these Hamas barbarians is proclaimed as genocide, even as the population of Gaza continues to grow. This violent speech that dehumanizes Jews and dehumanizes Israelis justifies their killing. And that's why these two young people, Sarah and Yaron, were killed. Elias Rodriguez was a university educated in person. He had an English major. Well, he certainly learned the language of hatred, because before he murdered Sarah and Yaron, he penned a manifesto, and I read but one line. Those of us against the genocide take satisfaction in arguing that the perpetrators and abettors have forfeited their humanity. For Rodriguez and his ilk, Israelis aren't human beings. Therefore, the murder of the innocent is justified. They say evil prospers when good men are silent. So it truly behooves all of us that we must speak up. We must press our elected officials to do more to stop the hate speech and anti-Semitism. We must demand of administrators of elite universities to finally take a stand against our anti-Zionist and anti-Semitism that permeates their campus. Perhaps most importantly, we must all speak up to restore our shared Judeo-Christian values as the bedrock of this great country, Australia. And to conclude, the Jewish people are a resilient people, and we will meet the challenges ahead with determination, with courage, and with strength. We'll continue our mission to be a light unto the nations, and we'll continue to declare, Yisrael Chai. Providence had it that our next speaker is certainly timely, Rabbi Leo Dee. He's had a broad career spanning both the rabbinate and being a financial analyst across two great countries in the United Kingdom and in Israel, which has now become his home. But yet it was that event of April 2023 that changed his life forever, when his beloved wife Lucy and his two daughters Maya and Rina were brutally massacred by Hamas terrorists on their way from Tiberia for Pesach. But now he stands strong, and he's there to promote peace, shalom, both on a personal, national, and a global scale. He was recently here in Melbourne. Unfortunately, I did not have the opportunity to hear him, but I'm absolutely delighted that he's taken from his busy schedule from Israel to share with us a few thoughts. Rabbi Dee.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Resberg, and thank you to all of you who assemble, I guess, regularly to discuss Israel. And of course, we love you all, and we appreciate everything that you're doing from a great distance. And it's my honor to speak to you today. I'm going to say, I think I've got 25 minutes. I will say a few words what happened to my family on the 7th of April, 2023. Then I'll talk a little bit about my wife and my two daughters. And then I'll talk about how we deal with tragedy in life, and particularly in the context of the 7th of October. And hopefully it will somehow come together, and we do it very, very quickly. On the 7th of April, 2023, we set route on our Passover holiday. It was a Friday morning. And in two cars, my wife with my daughter Maya, who was 20, and my daughter Rina, who was 15, me with two of my kids, Talia and Yehuda, and my fifth daughter, Karen, was in Jerusalem for her national service, staying over with a home for kids at risk. We got halfway up the 90 highway on the Jordan Valley between our home in Efrat and Tiberias, and Waze wanted us to take a left, avoid some traffic. I changed the route to go straight ahead, and my wife did not, and she encountered two Hamas terrorists, and we buried my two daughters on the Sunday and my wife on the Tuesday after she had donated 5 organs and saved 5 lives, including an Arab citizen in the north of Israel. A little bit about the girls. My wife, Lucy, her name meant light in Latin, and she was the person who spread light to her friends. We discovered this after the tragedy, which unfortunately is the case sometimes, that you only discover about your loved ones when it's too late. But we held a birthday party for her in her absence 3 months after the tragedy, invited her closest friends and asked them what she meant to them. And one by one, they said she was the person who saw the light in our soul and encouraged us to bring that trait out. And then I realized that that's what she had done for me, because I quit my job as a private equity investor 21 years ago in order to become a rabbinical student in Israel. And if you'd asked me 3 years ago why I did that, I would have had a whole list of self-serving justifications from myself. But once I heard this, I realized it was really her decision. And it made more sense that she had seen the light in me, that I could do more than just make money. And normally a woman doesn't want her husband to quit a well-paid job to become a student for 4 years, but she did. So it really was in her merit. So if we shine any light in these few minutes, it's in her merit. Maya, my oldest daughter, we named her after Mayim of Yah, which means the water of Hashem, which refers to the Torah, the Old Testament. And she was somebody who loved to learn and to teach the Bible. And she, in fact, innovated a beautiful event, weekly event in the school that she was working in her final year of life in Yerucham in the south of Israel, where on Thursday morning break times, she would invite all the girls in year 9 to listen to a little sermon that she prepared and give them free snacks, chocolate and crisps. And she got volunteering, 20 people would come. And I learned recently that her friends spread this initiative out to 500 schools now, that it happens around the world, and particularly in Israel. So if we spread any biblical knowledge from this, then that is in Maya's merit. Rina, her name means the happiness that comes from looking at a better future, and the happiness of hope. And she was somebody who spread hope to a lot of her friends. And if we spread any hope, again, that's in Rina's merit. So how do you deal with tragedy? I think there are 2 ways. There is the natural way, and there is the, I suppose, I'd call it the Jewish way, but maybe the Judeo-Christian way. The natural way is really outlined by Job. The book of Job is 42 chapters. For those of you who have not read it, most of you probably read it more than most Jewish people have read. The first chapter, God gives Job every punishment, every tragedy under the sun. The next 40 chapters, he sits at home and his best friends visit him and say, maybe you deserved it, maybe you don't deserve it. Maybe God cares about us, maybe he doesn't care about us. Maybe you've been a good person in your life, maybe you've been a bad person in your life. They come to no conclusion. And in chapter 42, God gives Job reasons to celebrate. He leaves the room, closes the door, we close the book, and we're left in complete bafflement as to what the whole book was about. And our rabbis say about the book of Job that 2 things. Number 1, it's probably fiction. But number 2, if it did happen, Job was probably not Jewish. In other words, he was probably a pagan, pre-Jewish. And the reason they say that is because this is not let's say, a religious way to deal with tragedy, to sit at home and to talk about it, even though all of our religions, Jews, Christians, everybody has such a ceremony after tragedy. This is just a natural response to tragedy, but it's not actually a religious response. What is a religious response to tragedy? And I know in our faith, we have a character who appears in the Talmud who expresses to us this model. I'm sure in the New Testament there's similar characters. Rabbi Akiva was a great rabbi at the time of the Roman persecution, probably about 100 years after the death of Jesus. And he trains 24,000 students, takes 24 years to do so, and all of them are massacred by the Romans in a period of 7 weeks at the time of the Bar Kokhba rebellion, where Bar Kokhba was a Jewish general who was trying to rebuild the third temple and take over Jerusalem once more from the Romans. And Rabbi Akiva supported him with his students. They were fighting and they got massacred by the Romans. So in a period of 7 weeks, Rabbi Akiva loses all his students, all his friends, most of his family, all his life's work. And he had the right to sit like Job and be visited by friends. Of course, he had no friends because they were all massacred, but he had the right to go into depression and to disappear from humanity, and nobody could have blamed him. And yet, what he does is astounding. He picks 5 new students. He trains them to become the greatest rabbis of the generation. They basically write what we call the Mishnah, which is the source of the Talmud, which is the source of all Jewish teachings from them. And the question is, how did he have the strength to start again after such a terrible tragedy? And for this, I can give 3 reasons, which hopefully will speak to all of us. First of all, he looks into a book. And this is a story about a people who fall to the lowest level of humanity. They're slaves to the largest empire in the world. They're about to become idol worshippers as well. And if that happens, their fate will be the same as every other people who became slaves and idol worshippers. They will disappear and assimilate, and there'll be no trace of them. And yet at the last minute, God picks them up and takes them to Mount Sinai, gives them the Torah. And that is really the height of human history, the only time in history that God appears to a whole people at one time. And I guess Rabbi Akiva looks at this and says, this is the pattern of Jewish history. That when the Jewish people have a tragedy, that is the beginning of a redemption. And we know that in the New Testament, that certainly is the case, but certainly also for us. Whenever there's been a tragedy, it's been followed by redemption. We saw this obviously in the Bible, but we also see this in 1948, 3 years after the Holocaust. We re-established the state of Israel after 2,000 years. And in 1967, my parents tell me they were sitting around the kitchen table in London, watching a 4-inch black and white television, listening to the BBC, reporting how all the Arab countries were on the border of Israel about to attack, and they would expect a second Holocaust and all the Jews be wiped out. And 6 days later, Israel was controlling the Western Wall and Judea and Samaria. So we see this is the pattern. When things get very bad, they get very good. It's 1 step backwards, and it's 2 steps forwards for our history. And I think that that's another reason. That's one reason why Rabbi Akiva perhaps had some hope about the future. And I say hope and not optimism, because my teacher, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, who was the chief rabbi of England and the Commonwealth for 20 years, used to say that the difference between optimism and hope is that optimism is believing that things will get better, but hope is doing something to make them better. And I think that is our task as religious people, to have hope, not optimism, to actually get out there and do things. I'm so pleased to hear you talking about what you plan to do to help Israel and Jews in Australia. But the second reason, which I think that Rabbi Akiva had this hope, I discovered on the saddest day of the Jewish year, which occurred 3 months after our tragedy. It's called Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of Av, which is the anniversary of the destruction of the first and second temples. And on that day, there's a lot of mourning that takes place in the synagogue service. But strangely, in the morning of that service, there are some signs of happiness, like a happy day. In fact, in the book of Lamentations, the day is called a festival, which is odd. And so I asked myself, what is it about the saddest day of the year that it could be called a festival? And I realized that, if you are the person who something has happened to which is so tragic that you can't explain it, you can't talk about it, you can't understand it, then you actually are the person who has the most hope, which is rather strange and bizarre. But actually, when you've been at the bottom level of happiness, then you know for sure that every day after that is going to be a higher day of happiness, greater day of happiness. But for most of us, we hover at a very high level of happiness. We don't appreciate it. But if we miss our breakfast, we're suddenly sad. And if something happy happens, we're happy, but we're in this range. But once you've tragically experienced the bottom of the pit, every day is a happy day. And I think that's another reason that Rabbi Akiva could be so positive, because once he'd lost everything, he really couldn't lose any more. And that's why he risked his life to teach more students the Torah. And in the end, of course, he's killed by the Romans for what he does. But even that is not as bad as what he's already been through. So I think that's something else. A third thing which I learned, which possibly explains how biblical response to tragedy can be to get up and start again, was after the 7 days of mourning for my wife and daughters. I was approached by a lot of people and asked to speak publicly or to engage in projects in their memory. And I became very busy. And I was seeing a psychologist at the time. I went for 10 visits. The last visit, he said to me, he said, Leo, you are suffering two parallel traumas. So number one, you come home to an empty house at night, your wife and daughters are not there, you have extra time. Whatever you do in that time is going to be, to remind you of why you have it. It's going to be traumatic. He said, also, just remembering them is going to bring you to tears. And I said, Ellie, I said, you know what? After the mourning period was finished, I got up and I started doing things, and it's helped me in two ways. Number one, I come home at night, usually 11 o'clock at night. I'm very busy during the day. I don't have time to think what I might do with my spare time. And number two, when I do remember my wife and daughters, which is much of the time, I don't always cry, but sometimes I feel proud that I'm doing something meaningful in their memory. So, when you do something positive in the memory of those you've lost, that can actually give you strength as well to carry through. So I think that for Rabbi Akiva and for many people who engage in these things, that's part of the therapy, is actually rebuilding your life. But I want to go back to the first reason that Rabbi Akiva could have had positivity. He looks into the Bible. The Bible is a story of people who fall to the bottom of the pit and then are lifted up to the top over a very short period of time. And I think that if we ask ourselves what's happening in Israel at the moment, that is what's happening. We really were sent to the bottom of the pit on the 7th of October. And really, it was the worst tragedy for the Jewish people, certainly in 85 years, but maybe even in all of history in some respects, because during the Holocaust, the Nazis kept a secret what they were doing. In the attack on the 7th of October, our enemies actually publicized it widely on live TV. And I think it was the first genocide that ever took place on live TV and was celebrated in real time by people around the globe. And I think for that reason, it ranks probably as one of the lowest points of humanity. But if we wanted to know that God has a plan to bring us up from here, I think he has his fingerprints all over the story, you see, because it happened on a Jewish festival called Simchat Torah, where we open the Torah from scratch and we read from the beginning of Genesis, the creation of the world. And God was saying to us on the 7th of October, a new world is beginning. And this is a blessing, because after the period of mourning was over for my wife and daughters, I turned to my remaining kids, to Tali and Karen and to Yehuda, and I said, we are starting a new life, a new world. We had life number one with 2 parents and 5 kids. We now have life number 2 with 1 parent and 3 kids. We've had 30 days of tears and mourning and suffering, but we're starting again. It's going to be a good life, a new life, a happy life, with memories of life number 1, but a new world completely. And I think God was saying to Jews in Israel, life is starting again. I think he was saying to Jews around the world, everything is changing now from the 7th of October. It's a new world. And I think he was saying to Christians and to people all over the world has changed as of 7th of October, which we've seen, I think, quite dramatically. And also, if we look at the first 4 words that God says in Genesis, he says, "Let there be light." And if you ever ask yourself what he's talking about, Of course, the sun and the moon are created on day 4. So what light is God referring to on the first day of creation when he says, let there be light? I think the simple understanding is the light of truth, the light that distinguishes between truth, between good and evil. And every day of creation, God says it was good, or it was very good, or it wasn't good. And that's because the light is shining brightly as to what is good and what is evil during the 6 days of creation. And if we look at what happened on the 7th of October, the light was shining on pure evil and pure good. Pure evil, I think we can all agree what we saw that took place live on television was pure evil. But even afterwards, as we saw people dancing and singing in the streets, celebrating in the streets of Sydney and London and Paris and New York, and screaming, kill the Jews, that was the light shining on pure evil. And as I say, thank God. Why thank God? Because not one anti-Semite was created on the 7th of October. Every anti-Semite that exists today was also an anti-Semite on the 6th of October. And all that happened was God turned on the light and we could see them. And this is a tremendous blessing for us as Jews. It's a tremendous blessing for Christians and for all good people around the world, because the moment you see what you're up against, you can start dealing with it. And obviously in America, they chose a different administration because they were not satisfied. Other countries, they have not yet. But we can see that is changing the world, the light shining on evil. But light was also shining on pure good. And when the light shines on pure good, you see revealed miracles. And I think, we can all agree we've seen revealed miracles since the 7th of October, even on the 7th of October. If Hezbollah had attacked on the 7th of October, it's clear that they could have taken over half the country. God forbid they didn't. We don't know why. And thank God they didn't. So we are in a very strong position now to regain power in Gaza and to reestablish sovereignty. And so this is an open miracle. We saw plenty of miracles. We saw 550 missiles coming from Iran in the last year and a half. Everyone had the capacity to kill at least 200 people. We expected a death toll of at least 100,000 Israelis. And thank God not one Jewish Israeli was harmed. I think a couple of Arabs were. This is an open miracle. There is no explanation. If we say it's because of the Iron Dome, we have to bear in mind that there's only one country that has an Iron Dome, and that is Israel, invented mostly here. And it's the only country that has a full coverage of the sky with the Iron Dome. And the other thing to bear in mind is that Israel has shot down more missiles in the last year and a half than all the other countries in the world in the history of time. So what we've seen is just not natural. Then we saw a helicopter fall down with the president and the foreign minister of Iran, the two leaders of the most enemy state that we have. This is not normal. If you look on Google, it doesn't happen. Maybe in the Bible it happens, but in any war in history, it's not happened that the two leaders just fall out of the sky. And then we saw the incident of the pagers blowing up in Hezbollah. Thousands of terrorists being killed. Many people said it was like the plague of the firstborn, because the firstborn in Egypt were the soldiers, the violent ones, the ones who were going to inherit power. And God takes them out individually without creating any civilian casualties in every household in Egypt. And the most precise attack on evil in the past 3,500 years since then was that attack where thousands of Hezbollah terrorists were taken out without harming anyone around them. So this really is a miracle of biblical proportions. We saw the miracle of the buses, which took place 4 or 5 months ago, where terrorists put bombs on many Tel Aviv buses, but they set the timer for 9 o'clock at night, not 9 o'clock in the morning in the rush hour. And they were discovered, and 10,000 people were saved because of that. And we see miracles every day on the battlefields, where incredible stories are happening. I haven't got time to go through some of those, but I'm sure you've heard of them. And I think that what we're seeing is that we're at a time of tremendous open miracles. And because of that, I would say if I had to give a name to the world we were in before October the 7th, I would call it the world of exile. And if I had to give a name to the world we're in today, in Israel, it's the world of redemption, the Messianic period. And I don't sort of apologize for using those terms, because our rabbis use those terms for the last 2,000 years in the Talmud. And Maimonides states it that there will be no difference between this world and the Messianic period, except that Israel will be in control of her own borders, will not be under attack from her enemies. And I think if we were to ask anyone in the streets of Tel Aviv today, what is the purpose of this war, they'd say to get rid of the existential threat of Iran, of Hezbollah, of Hamas. And we are well past halfway through that battle. And this really is the battle for the Messiah, according to Jewish belief. And I think we're all in tremendous times. We are the generation that merits to see this. So this is really, this is where we are. So I know I titled this talk, The Resilience of the Israeli People. I wanted to, and Rabbi Rosenberg mentioned resilience. I want to apologize to him, but I also apologize to myself because I want to contradict myself and contradict him, because I actually don't believe that Israelis are resilient. And I'll explain to you why. Because those of you who have studied physics will know that resilience is a specific thing. It's actually if you squeeze a spring and squeeze it closed, and then you let go and you measure its length afterwards, if it goes back to exactly the same length it started at, it's called 100% resilient. If it goes back to 80%, it's called 80% resilient. So it's a measure of how much you spring back to where you were before. And I have to say that as someone who has suffered tremendous trauma and loss, if I had only gone back to where I was before, I couldn't survive. And I think this is true for pretty much all the victims of terror and families, bereaved families. Because my life would just go back to what it was before, minus 3 members of my family of 7. And every moment would just be an open wound, a reminder of what I lacked. Instead, I felt, and many of the other families feel the same way, that we have to do something more. We actually have to grow from this experience. And this is something which we call not resilience, but hope. And it's interesting that the national anthem of Israel is Hatikva, which means the hope. And really speaking, one has to live in Israel with hope. And people do live in Israel with hope. I mean, it's interesting that the birth rate in Israel is 3 children per woman, which is about twice that of Europe, America, Australia, other Western countries. It's the only Western country where there's a positive birth rate. And that's because we have hope for the future. We actually look forward to building something better, to growing, and to society that's built on hope. And when we look at our youth, I think it's the greatest thing to see that our youth have stood up, are fighting on the battlefield against evil, defending the world. And in fact, a rabbi that I know in America, I was in his community for a Sabbath in July last year. He said the following. He said that Bibi Netanyahu had just spoken in Congress. And he said, during Bibi's speech, the world changed. And nobody noticed except him. So he explained. He said that and for the last 2,000 years, Jews have lived in exile, not in their country, at the whim and at the grace of the people of the world who have allowed them in, usually persecuted them at some point, and then we've had to move. And that's been the pattern of Jewish history in diaspora, that our existence is dependent on the kindness of nations that brought us in, but it doesn't always last so long. But he said everything changed in the speech of Bibi Netanyahu, because if you listen to what he said, our war is your war, our enemy is your enemy, and our victory is your victory. And what he said was, effectively, no longer are Jews living in the diaspora at the grace of the nations of the world, but actually from now on, the future of the Western world depends on the success of Israelis on the battlefield defending the first line against terror. And everything has changed from that point on. So we really are at a time of redemption, fulfilling the biblical stories, the prophetic visions. And I'm personally, for one, very excited about it. I travel. The reason I was in Australia, I talk a lot about Aliyah, about encouraging Jews to move home, because that is the prophetic vision that at this time, Jews will move home. And it's a fascinating statistic that actually, if you say there are 15 million Jews in the world, about 7.6 million of them now live in Israel. So we just passed the tipping point of halfway, which is very significant for Jews, but it also means, according to our our rabbinical sources that once you get to that point, everybody follows. And so this is the return of the exiles. It's the first time that this has happened since King David and the time of the first temple. So we really are in incredible times. And I wonder to myself whether October the 7th happened in order to bring Jews back to Israel for this moment. And it happened at the time when exactly when the majority of Jews happened to be in Israel. And this is the tipping point. And I want to say one last thing, perhaps I got a couple of minutes. I always say to people, if you were God and you wanted to bring Jews back to Israel, what might you do? And I think that, one thing you do is probably send people down their streets around the world screaming, kill the Jews, just as a sort of warm up to tell them, maybe you should do something. Number two, you might get them posting posters all over their neighborhoods that says, bring them home, which in my opinion has nothing to do with the hostages, everything to do with diaspora Jews. And the third thing you might do is appoint a president of the United States who is so obviously not a natural appointee, but something which is sort of not natural. And in order to emphasize that, you might have him subject to an assassination attempt where a bullet goes past his ear, so that he stands up on television and says, I feel I've been appointed by God for a particular purpose, but doesn't reveal what that purpose is. And then you might also do something else, which is you might notice that sadly, Jews don't leave because of persecution. I can prove that because 6 million Jews were sadly massacred in Europe only 80 years ago, and there are still 1 million Jews living there. So persecution alone is not enough to bring Jews home. But there is something that does bring home Jews very effectively, which is when you confiscate their money. And it's a sad fact, but it's true that the 800,000 Jews who left Arab countries in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and 70s left because their money was confiscated by the state or was about to be, and there are none left there. None of them returned. So if you were God and you wanted to make sure the Jews left, you might have this president implement some very strange economic policies that would for sure create a worldwide recession and depression, which would mean that people might actually at some point say, okay, now financially there's no reason for me to stay. I may as well leave and go and come home. So I think that what's happening at this moment is really a biblical moment. I mean, many people say that we're currently seeing the last book of the Bible being written, and please God, we should all be redeemed, and we should see the time of the Messianic period emerge as peacefully as possible over the next few weeks and months and years, and we should all have the merit to see that through. Thank you for your time.
That was just wonderful. Thank you, Rabbi. How do we contact you? Have you got a website, a podcast, or
I've got a Facebook page, which I think is Rabbi Leo Dee, I think, or Rav Leo Dee. RAVLEODW. I'm not very technical, but I think probably you'll find me on Facebook somewhere.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. So I was very encouraged by your very positive message, and I think sometimes we with all the negative news coming through, on a day-to-day basis, we walk over the miracles that are happening at the same time. And I think there needs to be an emphasis on all the positive, miraculous things that are happening that you've brought forward tonight. So I just want to say that's a fantastic message. I'd love to have some more time with you talking about those issues, and I'll invite you to one of our Sunday afternoons, which we run every week, to share more of that story. But it's just a great privilege to have you on. I'm very glad. And for your information, I know that you've been talking with Ian Warby from Christians for Israel, and who, for most of you won't know, he's actually in hospital watching tonight as he had a severe heart attack a day and a half ago, and miraculously has been just brought back. So he's sitting back in his hospital bed and he's okay, which is just remarkable. So I'm sure we're going to have more contact as time goes on with you. So thank you very much indeed. I'm sure there's plenty of questions, and we'll look up your website on Facebook and we'll put it out with the recording so people who want to contact you can have contact, and I'll certainly be back in touch with you as to ongoing discussions. So thank you indeed from the bottom of our heart. David, I'm going to pass back to you. You've got a preview of a new film coming out.
Yes, I shall set that up now. So I'll just remove you from the spotlight and go to share. Yeah, so David Kean produced a film, I Am Israel, which showcases individuals across the land of Israel, as well as natural and cultural and religious aspects of the land. The other thing is that he has produced a follow-up film to this, which this is the trailer for, and this film is also now available. So you can see on here what it is, enough to find it online, but we could pop a link in the chat if we have time to do that. So I shall share this. All right, get rid of that one. This one. Okay.
Rabbi, in the Bible, over and over again, I read that God has placed his name on this city. What does that mean?
We're now in Passover. It happens to be today's Passover. And one of the elements that when we left Egypt was that we need to put on our doors the blood of a sheep. God protected the Jewish people, the ones that marked their doors. Until today, we mark our doors with the words, the special words from the Bible that protect our homes.
Everywhere we go throughout this city, on the houses, on each gate, there is a mezuzah. And a mezuzah is a container with a biblical scroll inside containing the passage that Jesus said is the most important commandments in Scripture, and a symbol for God's name, the Hebrew letter Shin.
You guys went past the mezuzah right over here. You could see this, it was a Shin. Yerushalayim, the city of Jerusalem. If you look from a bird's view, you actually have like the three rivers and also the three mountains create that mark of the Shin.
From the beginning of creation, God always knew this is the place. Jerusalem is not just like any other city. It's very clear in the Bible, God chose this city as the place that he was going to make his name known throughout the entire world. The Bible says that God put his name on Jerusalem.
The Bible says, Adonai b'Yerushalayim asim et shmi. In Jerusalem will I put my name. It also says, Uvachar b'Yerushalayim liot shmi sham, uvachar b'David liot al ami Israel. I have chosen Jerusalem for my name to be there, and I have chosen David to rule my people, Israel.
Over and over again, the scriptures say that God has placed his name in Jerusalem. On Zion is where his name dwells. And biblically, that's his reputation. He's staked his reputation to this city. But even physically, just like God's name is on every doorpost in this city, from above, if you look down at Jerusalem, God's name, Shaddai, is imprinted stamped into the hills.
When Moses asked God to show his glory, God reveals his name. He reveals who he is. It's all about his reputation. It's all about his name. And that's why Mount Zion, the mountain of God, is so important. It bears his reputation. It's God's name.
Begin your adventure at IamIsraelFilm.com.
That's wonderful, David. Thank you very much indeed. Now, that young presenter, I think we know that was speaking there, and I noticed earlier that one of our original committee members, Dion Van Balen, joined us from Israel, who's up there on Yahavel with the ministries. So it's wonderful to have him with us as well. Just again, so I just encourage people you just Google that and go to that website, and you can get the film and the DVD and share it with your friends. Great time for Christmas presents and mid-year presents, whatever birthday presents are coming up, always to share these sorts of things. So it's wonderful at this time that we can introduce our second guest for the night. Jonathan Davis is there in Israel. I had the pleasure of meeting with Jonathan about a month ago through our good friend Itam Drori, who heads up the Victorian branch of the Friends of Reichman University. And I had such a good time talking with him. I just thought it would be great for him to share his story, and particularly the story of Reichman University and its values and principles of how it's been formed and what it stands for. So welcome, Jonathan. Great to have you with us.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
So over to you. Just share part of your story, and then, we'll see where we go. We might have some time for Q&A. It's a bit later on.
Okay, well, terrific. We are a private and non-profit university in Israel, and our main mission statement is what we call humanistic Zionism. This is the Zionism of Theodor Herzl, Vladimir Jabotinsky, Ben-Gurion, Menachem Begin. We believe in the Declaration of Independence of the State of Israel, and we believe in a country by the people, for the people, with the minority in mind. But we're practically the only university in Israel out of 70 universities and colleges that flaunts the fact that we're a Zionist university, and we're not afraid to flaunt it. In this world of woke and cancel culture and anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, we're not afraid to flaunt the ideals of the country. So we give, in our acceptance policies, preferential treatment to students who serve in combat units of the IDF. We give them credit for serving the country and for being willing to sacrifice in the country. And we're not afraid to basically give them affirmative action in that sense. We're also very happy that we are a user-friendly campus for people of faith. And we have students at our university who are Christian Zionists, who are Jewish Zionists, and Zionists of other kinds who wish to embrace us and be a part of us. During this war, 55% of our students served in reserves. Unfortunately, we've had 17 students and alumni killed in action. And we have 60 students on campus with prosthetic legs. And we have hundreds of other students basically suffering from PTSD. Nonetheless, we take these students by the hand. We provide them with psychological help, with resilience. And these students themselves are very resilient. And these students themselves are even more Zionist than they were beforehand. And so we don't get involved politically. As far as we're concerned, you can be a right-wing Zionist, a centrist Zionist, or a left-wing Zionist. But if your common denominator is that you're willing to serve this country and sacrifice for the country and serve in the armed forces of the country, that's the common denominator, basically, of whom we all are. We're extremely unified. And what's really important is that we have a huge international school on campus. And I'm the dean of the international school. At this international school, we have 2,400 students from 90 different countries. It's called the Rafael Recanati International School. And these are students, all of whom are studying for full academic degrees in English. So we have 8 undergraduate degrees taught here in English, some in the fields of psychology, economics, business, entrepreneurship, computer science, communications, international relations. And we have another 8 graduate programs where you can complete your graduate degrees like MAs or MSCs. For the undergraduates, it's BAs and BSCs. We're fully accredited by the Council for Higher Education in Israel. I'm happy to say we have 700 Americans on this campus studying for full degrees. We have 100 Brits on this campus studying for full degrees. We have 150 French. We have about 200 from Latin America. We've got about 30 Aussies studying on this campus. We would love to double that number from Australia. If you happen to know of any Australian students who wish to come here and study here, they don't necessarily have to be Jewish. If they want to get the night off for Christmas, they have it. I'll even subsidize their Christmas meal if necessary. Okay, and in fact, I do have a group of Christian Zionists studying here for the undergraduate degree, and I once subsidized a minibus for them to go to Nazareth and have their Christmas meal in Nazareth. I paid for it. I was very proud of it because, in my opinion, there's nothing better than Christian Zionists. They're frequently better than Jewish Zionists, but don't repeat that because I'll sound anti-Semitic. But anyway, it's for us. It's wonderful that there are groups of Christian Zionists like all of you in Australia. We have groups also in Germany, in Scandinavia, in the United States, all of whom send students to study here, actually. I've had the students of a couple of pastors from Texas who studied here for full degrees. And they used to go on Sundays to the Baptist village here and pray. And they used to have their little Bible group here. They used to sit around the grass here and study Bible. So we can, we are in the Holy Land. We don't let really anything get the best of us. Don't believe everything you read in the press, especially on some of the TV networks. You can't really believe everything they say. Basically, we're here in Herzliya, by the sea, a city named for Herzl, Herzliya. This is where our campus is, nestled in a beautiful, surrounded by trees. By the way, surrounded by many eucalyptus trees, which the Aussies brought here in the early part of the 20th century, when the Aussies gallantly fought here against the Turks and the Germans. And there are whole stories about that. By the way, there are whole graveyards in Israel full of young Australian soldiers who gave their lives to fight for freedom and fight for democracy. And I know I can be sure that there still is an Australian armed force, and I hope you never have to use it again. but you never know. So it's always a good idea to have a strong army and not let your guard down. I heard that ships of some very interesting countries are sometimes spotted off of the coast of Sydney. So a good idea, to keep your eye on things. You never know what's going to be when you need to defend democracy, need to defend freedom of religion, and the Judeo-Christian ethic, that Judeo-Christian ethic which we hold so dear. And so basically, this university, this private and nonprofit university of 8,500 students, of whom 1/3 are international students who I'm in charge of. So you could basically say that this is a patriotic university. It's a university which respects religious beliefs of all religions, by the way. But if some of those religions don't want to tolerate us, they can find other universities to go to, north or south of us, or in other Middle Eastern countries. They're welcome to go and study in a university in Egypt if they want, in Jordan if they want. Maybe they want to study in a university in Iran. Okay, but our university believes in the freedoms and is based on the Judeo-Christian ethic. So that's who we are. So I'll be happy to take any questions that you have.
Yeah, that's great, Jonathan. Thank you. I was really impressed when I heard that, and I think there'll be mums and dads and grandmas and grandpas here who would like possibly to find out more about Reichman University. So if you've got a chance, you might be able to put a contact for you into the chat group, or I'm happy to put it out there when we release the recording of tonight I think we've got now somewhere around 13,000 people on our database in Australia. So
that's great.
We don't always get them on a Tuesday night, but they often go back through the recordings, etc. So I'd be happy to put them in touch with you. It's a fascinating thing for me. I mean, your story as well, because I think you were British born and then educated in USA and then called back into Israel. So, something of your personal story would be really interesting to share as to why you were called back and how did you get to be, head of a university section, as well as still serving in the IDF as a reservist. So
well, thank you for that question. Thank you very much for that question. I had not intended to speak about myself, but basically, you're right. I was born in the UK. Natalie, do me a favor. Here's Natalie. Natalie works for me. Natalie is originally from Sydney, Australia. Get your face in the photo, they can see.
Hi, Nat.
Hi. Natalie's originally from Sydney. Natalie, do me a favor. Type my credentials on the bottom of this call, so that if anyone wants to send me an email or send me a WhatsApp, they'll be able to do so. Okay. You're the technological genius who knows how to do that. Don't worry, that's because she went to high school in Australia and I went to high school in LA. So she's smarter than I am. And we'll type that in. And any one of your 13,000 people who wants to contact me with regards to the possible study here, since you're a Christian Zionist organization, I will take care personally of each of you.
John, I'll send it to you to put in. I don't think I can.
Okay, so Natalie's going to send it to you. Maybe you can type it in there after. Natalie will send this to you by WhatsApp. The idea, very simply, is any Christian Zionist in Australia wants to study here, I will take personal care of them. So I'll put my email on there, and I'll take care of them, and I'll tell them how they can study here. But either way, as far as I'm concerned, I was born in the UK, raised in California, went to high school in California. I was in a traditional Jewish home. We went to synagogue every Sabbath. We respected religion. And when I was about 18 years old, I went back east to a place called Columbia University. And Columbia University back then was just as radical and anti-Zionist as it is now. And things haven't changed at Columbia. Maybe there's less 60s music, and there's and there's more wild, insane music, but that same anti-Zionist rhetoric, that same rhetoric of people who want to flaunt Marxism or woke and cancel culture, they might have been dressed a little differently back then, but they're the same people, more or less. Of course, 5 or 6 years after they study at some of these universities, they suddenly become capitalists because they have to pay their mortgage. But that's another story. That could be a whole other lecture. But either way, I found myself with the opportunity when I was at Columbia University to go on a 1-year abroad program to the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. And so I took that opportunity. Lo and behold, my roommate was a paratrooper who had just recently liberated Jerusalem and made it part of Israel. And every Sabbath, he used to take me to another nook and cranny in the old city of Jerusalem and showed me how they took that street, went to the Western Wall, saw the Christian quarter, saw the Jewish quarter, saw all of the different aspects. And within 1 year, I decided to surprise my parents somehow and told them that I'm not coming back to Columbia because I found a way to finish my degree at the Hebrew University and not lose any academic time. So they accepted it. I think they got a little bit of a fright, but they accepted it. And when and my roommate had been in the paratroopers. So I decided when I graduated the university at the age of 22 at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, I joined the IDF paratroopers. During my 3.5 years of regular service, I also fought in the Yom Kippur War. I found myself on behind the line missions on the Iraqi-Syrian border and some pretty dangerous stuff that we did, mainly by helicopter. Back in those days when we didn't have all the technology that we have now, but simple is beautiful. And I'm here to tell the story. And some of my commanders live in the same village as I do. It's called Kochav Yair. It's called the Star of Yair, and it's named for Yair Stern of the Stern Gang. But that's another story on its own. And so basically I found myself meeting my wife Iris here, who was a volunteer during the Yom Kippur War. Since that time, we have 4 children and 10 grandchildren so far. I lived in Israel for the rest of that time. I was a civil servant for the state of Israel in a number of countries, including the United States, South Africa, the former Soviet Union, and Italy. And after my experience as a civil servant, I joined the university world. I've been at this university for 25 years, and I was hired here to build an international school. And I began the school with 30 students, and now we have 2,400. So there's inflation. Sometimes inflation is a good thing. So there's inflation in the number of students. They're still banging their doors down. I think I learned throughout all of this is that you need to have faith. You need to have a belief. I still go to synagogue. One of my children, who has many children, lives in Samaria on a hilltop.
Wow. Yeah.
He's a very faithful young man. So he's like, he's very close to where the action is, and very close to heaven, where he lives on a high altitude in Samaria. We visit him every week. And so I've got a brother and sister who live in the United States. They kind of forgot to come here. Both of my parents of blessed memory are buried here in Jerusalem. So that's more or less the story of my life. I've had a story of a person who immigrated to Israel for ideological reasons, basically, who served in a combat unit and took some big chances, and I does not regret any of them, and who managed to realize his dream. And I've been here for approximately 55 years in this country. Wow,
that's amazing. Yeah, I'm sure we could spend another half an hour talking about some of those outlandish chances you took during those days when you were in the IDF, etc. But we can't do that tonight, unfortunately. I'm just reminded again that if your son's up in Samaria, we should, I don't know if you've got any connections with Yahavel, but we should introduce you to Yahavel, who are up in that area particularly, who are some of our wonderful Jewish and Christian people that are in that area. So I'm
in very close contact with the Christian embassy here in Jerusalem.
Oh, great. Yep.
In fact, there are at least three of the employees of the Christian embassy actually sent their children to study at Reichman University.
Wow. Okay.
And every Rosh Hashanah, I receive a lovely bottle of wine from the Christian embassy. So,
wonderful. And as part of our committee, we have two at least are on tonight. The ICEJ, the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem, part of our committee members, and we work very closely with them as well. So I can see all these connections coming together. And there was a quick question that I thought I'd just cover before we close off with you, is the main courses that Reichman offer. I believe you've got a medical school.
We now have a medical school, but there's a need for a basic knowledge of Hebrew in order to be in the medical school. Yep. And you have to be an Israeli citizen to be in the medical school, because Israel has a shortage of medical doctors. And so we wanted to make sure that anyone who studies medicine here stays in Israel and practices medicine in Israel. Because of our Zionist values, we want to make sure that the medical doctors we train stay here, so that we have enough medical doctors in Israel. We lost a tremendous amount of medical doctors because during this Russian immigration that came here in the 1990s, which had many medical doctors, most of those people are now retired. So we now need to basically educate a whole brand new generation of medical doctors. But if you know some people who are Israeli citizens or know some basic Hebrew, some of the children, by the way, of the Christian Zionists who live in Jerusalem actually fit into that category. And you should know that there are also Christian Zionists who serve in the Israeli army. And they're fantastic. And they're great people.
Yeah. That's wonderful. So agriculture as well as in engineering, are they two of the main courses?
We don't teach agriculture, but we teach computer science, and we teach entrepreneurship, and we teach psychology, and we teach communications, and we teach economics, and we teach business, and all of those are professions that you can take into the market. Our big advantage is that we're very, very big on entrepreneurship, and we're very, very big in the high-tech world. We sometimes tell a joke that this university is surrounded by about 500 high-tech companies, so we call this Silicon Valley, as opposed to Silicon Valley, as opposed to Silicon Valley. Wadi in Arabic is a valley. Okay, and the other thing that I would leave you with the thoughts, in many ways, this university is like a biblical city of refuge. In the Bible, when someone was downtrodden or being run after, someone wanted to get them, there were always these 4 cities of refuge that you could go to. I consider ourselves to be a city of refuge for those who serve the country, for those who don't believe in woke or cancel culture, for those who are not anti-Zionists and not anti-Semites. This is the city of refuge for them. So I consider ourselves to be a city of refuge based on the ideals of the Judeo-Christian ethic. That's where you fit in. That's where you fit into my narrative, because to have allied forces like yourselves, to have had Christian Zionists like Ord Wingate, who trained the original Haganah in this country, and he was a Christian Zionist, to have Christian Zionists like Winston Churchill, who played a role in the creation of this country, and other Christian Zionists who today serve in the IDF, and other Christian Zionists who support Israel like you do, okay, we're one big family. And there's room for all of us. and there's far more unity than anything else between us.
Yeah, we're in agreement. Thank you, Jonathan. That was just wonderful to have you on and for you to share. I'm sure we're going to have more discussions, and the open invitation is for people who are traveling to Israel, that you would entertain them and have them down at Reichman to show them around.
If you ever have a mission,
yep.
a mission to Israel of
yep.
Christian scientists from Australia, and you want someone to speak to them about current events or the economic situation in Israel, or I can spoil you. I can have you entertained by 15 Australian students here from different cities in Australia. Okay,
yep.
and they could tell you what is it like to be an Aussie here in Israel. I could actually invite 3 or 4 Aussies who served in the Israeli army here to speak to you about their experience. Anything you guys want from me, you have. Okay,
yeah,
including maybe a free lunch. How's that? Not too many free lunches in this world, but no, I invite you.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Wonderful. I love that Australian flag together with the Israeli flag.
Yeah.
Make sure to show it to your foreign minister.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't worry. And that segues into before we close out tonight and pass to the rabbi once again, just to bring everybody up to date.
Let me just say one more sentence. May the Lord bless you and keep you, and make His light to shine upon you, and grant you happiness and health.
Wonderful. Blessings to you. Shalom. So for the majority of people who are on tonight who've been on the travel with us as SCAFI over the last almost 5 years now, 4 to 5 years, Southern Cross Alliance for Israel. I won't go through the background of how that was formed, but it was formed as just a group of Christians and Jewish people who wanted to support each other in times that were coming and to share each other's culture and background. We were never a formal organization, but over the years, and particularly since October the 7th, we felt a need to reach out into the influences in our country. And so in October last year, we, with and through the help of the now chairman of the Israel Allies Caucus, Andrew Wallace, we relaunched the Israel Allies Caucus in the Parliament House with some 34 or 35 parliamentarians, mainly Liberal Nationals, but we also had the ex-head of the Friends of Labour Israel supporters, Mike Kelly, that we launched again the caucus that's purpose is to bring together our parliamentarians, and the foundation that we have now started as a legal entity to support that is to help educate our parliamentarians first in the caucus, and then through them to their legislations, to their members, to their areas that they have influence. So we're on that journey, and we're working hand in hand with organisations such as Never Again Is Now, 9 Group, who work from the bottom up and just involve everybody. But we come from the perspective of helping our influencers, both parliamentary and business people, to understand and to support and to know the truth rather than what they read in the newspaper. And one of the things that both Rabbi and I and others of the committee have found is parliamentarians are like everybody else. They just read what the newspaper says and where the votes go. So we need to be in there working with them, supporting them. So we now have the first Israel Allies Foundation bank account where you can now contribute to. It will be DGR, but not right at the moment. So we're going through that process, but we need some founding funds just to get it up and get going and do such things as having morning teas at Canberra to help and invite our new parliamentarians, which might be vastly different from what we had a few months ago. So I just invite you to put that into your prayer list of how you might support that. So our first official live meeting is going to be in Adelaide in June, which our committee member Mark Mudry is organising, both in Parliament and with some influences in Adelaide. I'm hoping we'll also do a SCAFI meeting the last week of June, with some highlights of what we saw in Adelaide and who we met and all those sorts of things. And we have some other very exciting guests that we have lined up to come on board as well. So on that note, I'm just going to quickly pass to Rabbi Rosenberg for his closing statement.
John, thank you so much, and another inspirational evening. I'll just briefly conclude this forthcoming Monday and Tuesday is the Jewish festival of Shavuot, where there we remember and we celebrate the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai. You know, there's an old Jewish adage about Jewish holidays. They tried to kill us, we won, so let's eat. Shavuot, where we celebrate the giving of the Torah, it doesn't fit within that realm, but nevertheless, Jewish resourcefulness found a specific food to celebrate with, even on that occasion, and that is cheesecake. Cheesecake. How did we come to celebrate this festival of the giving of the Torah with cheesecake? Well, I'll explain. That 3,500 years ago at Mount Sinai, after hearing the Ten Commandments and the Torah, the first thing the Jewish people said after hearing those words, after a long night, what's there to eat? What's there to eat? And in fact, there was a challenge, because now that they had the laws of kashrut, their previous vessels that they cooked in were no longer kosher. So the only option they had was to eat dairy. And that is why we continue that wonderful custom to eat cheesecake over Shavuot. After hearing Rabbi Leo Dee, I must share with you this traditional story about what happened at Mount Sinai. The rabbis say that when the mountains of Israel heard that God was going to give the Torah, they all stepped forward, it should be given upon me. It said Mount Tabor said, I'm the tallest of mountains of Israel, let the Torah be given upon me. Har Carmel said, I'm the broadest mountain, let Torah be given on me. And God said, I will give Torah on Mount Sinai, because Mount Sinai is the humblest of all mountains, the humblest. So to teach humility, Torah was given on Mount Sinai. And the rabbis asked, if God wanted to teach humility, let him give Torah in a valley, a depression. Why a mountain? Because as much as we need to be humble, there are times too when we need to stand up, we need to speak up and be like a mountain, albeit a small mountain. And therefore, I'd certainly take inspiration from Rabbi Leo Dee. Notwithstanding the incredible challenges that he's had, he's chosen to speak up for good. And it's certainly a powerful message for all of us. Let us not remain silent when we see an injustice, when we see hate speech, when we see anti-Semitism. Let us stand up and speak out. But in all events, this Monday and Tuesday, let us all celebrate the festival of Shavuot by having some delicious cheesecake. Thank you for joining us, and God bless you all.
Thank you, Rabbi. And yes, I will go to the cheesecake shop. So looking forward to it. Thank you, everybody. Been a wonderful night. Please unmute and give everybody a wonderful hand and say thank you for all our guests and all of you. So blessings to you. Shalom.
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 Shalom. Israel
Thank
Chai.
you, wonderful speakers.
And
Good to have you.
Erev Tov.
God bless. Thanks for your prayers.
Shalom. Shalom.
Thanks,
Thank
Ian.
you.
Laila Tov.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Beautiful.
Bye.